If you can do all your stuff, what can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
I'm Claire Patton.
I'm Teresa Sparks.
And this is It Chooses You.
Yeah. And we were talking, the dear beloved Fred Willard passed recently, and we had planned on an episode where I talked about how much I love him and his work. But it doesn't seem as relevant now as it did when we planned it. So.
Doesn't seem important right now.
Important is the right word. Yeah, it doesn't seem as important. It isn't as important.
Yeah.
Straight up. So we talked a little bit this morning and decided to try and have the kind of conversation we have on the phone with each other about this stuff, meaning our complicity in white supremacy and the murder of people of color, on the podcast instead of in a phone call.
So the goal here is for us to have, as you said, the kind of conversations we have, just a frank, mistake-filled conversation about our own privilege.
Yeah. And while we were sort of planning it, it was something like whenever white people try and talk to other white people about it or the topic comes up, it's really uncomfortable because if you've read any American history, you understand that this is real and that we are all the beneficiaries. If we carry skin privilege in this country, we are the beneficiaries of a completely unjust justice system that exerts undue pressure and control over groups of people who have more melanin in their skin than we do.
Which, when you phrase it like that, fuck, man. Yeah, it's fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we talk about it on the phone, when we have casual conversations about it, we know each other and love each other. And so it's okay for us to make the kind of mistakes white people make as we are coming to terms with this. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to make those mistakes in public, where public is like someone who hasn't known you for 10 years and loves you, right?
Yeah.
But it is only uncomfortable for white people to make those mistakes. It doesn't make us not white. It doesn't make us not the recipient of all of those benefits. And so you and I were talking about like this kind of, like, if you phrase it this way, it's kind of ridiculous that like my discomfort as a white lady at talking about these things and my fear of making mistakes or being thought of as racist is somehow like more powerful than their actual oppression and murder.
Right.
You know? And when you put it that way, it's like, holy shit, that's fucked up.
We, I think, wanted to tell a story, just a personal story about our relationship.
Yeah.
And the role this discomfort and making mistakes can have.
Yeah.
Are you cool with that?
Absolutely.
So Teresa and I were on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and Teresa asked me a question. Do you want to tell folks at home about that question?
When we say a couple weeks ago, we mean before George Floyd was murdered. Mm-hmm. And I think the question you're talking about, I can't remember exactly what the question was that you're talking about. So why don't
you asked me, you said, I notice that when I talk about white privilege, you're quite silent.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dig into that. Mm-hmm. And basically, I said to you that it was a hard thing for me to talk about because I didn't feel like an expert.
Yeah.
And there we go. There's the fear of mistake, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. Basically, I was saying I don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And I know that you are a much better educated white person than I am on the issues of race. So your response to me was, this is great. You said, I have some books. Can I mail them to you? And then you said, are you willing to move through this?
Yeah.
And I cannot describe the discomfort I felt in that moment. I was pissed off at you for I felt you holding me down and saying, yeah, okay, white woke woman, you know, are you gonna move through? And it was so clear in that moment. And basically then I couldn't sleep. I think my response was, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, something like that.
Right? Because I felt like if I said, no, I don't want to read books, then I'm a dick.
I like that you're glossing over the fact that it's pretty condescending for me to say, hey, can I send you some books you should read? I like that you're leaving that out of it. That's kind of you. Thank you.
That pissed me off too.
Yeah.
But actually where my discomfort came from was being held down and asked that question.
Yeah.
So I couldn't sleep that night, and I ended up composing an email to you. And it's funny because I don't usually set things down in writing when I'm emotional.
Sure. Good practice.
Yeah, I'm very careful about that. But for some reason, I just felt like I had to do it. Like all my anger and again, we come up against making mistakes, right? So I basically emailed you a litany of reasons why I am woke.
Yes.
And then explained to you why I was upset at you offering to send me books, and then called you a jerk.
You called me a dick.
Oh, a dick. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. And then called you a dick and then ended the email.
Yeah. So I woke up that morning.
Oh God.
And
I didn't even think about that.
I was like, oh, Claire sent me Oh, okay. But when I got it, I remembered my own reactions the first time someone pinned me down about it. And I was like, oh, first of all, let's just say right off the top, race is a construct. It's not real, but we talk about it in these terms. So I'm just going to keep using them for now. I was lucky enough to be a part of a couple of groups that were specifically looking at racial power dynamics within institutions. And so I have been called out appropriately, right? Always correct.
Totally.
And then immediately I'm like, oh shit, they're right. God, I'm disappointed in myself again, right? I've been called out appropriately, and I know that one of the things that white ladies in particular, probably all white people, but I speak from my own perspective, which is a middle-aged white lady. And middle-aged white ladies like to know what we're doing. And we also take things really, really personally when we're called out about race. Because it's never about, it always feels like it's about Teresa is a racist. Now, Teresa is a white lady raised in America. Teresa is a racist. I am a racist. That's just the water we're swimming in. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can be white in this country and not be racist, even if you're trying not to be always.
Right. And can I just
please?
Pause there
Yeah,
for a second?
yeah.
That's really hard for white people to get behind.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing about why that's hard for white people is it's hard to be told that you are a certain way.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what, no matter how good you are, no matter how hard you try, you are this thing. You are this way.
Yeah.
That's so hard. And yet that's what people of color have been enduring.
Yeah.
For hundreds of years.
Uh-huh.
That you are this.
Yeah.
These are my stereotypes. They are true. We're going to build a system that reinforces that and is a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's also, this conversation is not, we didn't plan it, so it's just going to ramble everywhere. And I hope that we agree that we're just going to leave it rambling because we're trying to give an example of what it's like to have a conversation about this with other white people because racism is a white disease and we have to inoculate each other. It just has to happen. But part of the difficulty is white people are allowed to not look at our institutional role. We're allowed to be on the personal level all the time because it is Teresa and the things I'm doing are an expression of me. They're not an expression of my institutional power in this country. Right. And that's what we're told. That's how we're educated. That's what the world reinforces in us. And so when you start interrogating that a little bit and saying, oh, wait a minute, am I me in this moment or am I a white person in this moment? And maybe I am a white person, but sometimes I want to just be me and sometimes my whiteness is what's actually driving what's happening. A lot of the time my whiteness is actually driving what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really hard one the difference between the personal and the institutional. So if you talk to somebody and you say white people are racist, they hear, I think you personally are a racist.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that's true, but it lands differently. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, can we circle back
Yeah, sure.
to your education?
Oh, yeah. I worked in an academic institution that had a lot of manifestations of imbalanced racial power dynamics popping up in a short period of time, including students using racial slurs in the classroom in response to discussions about white privilege and other things, other ways of being sure that whiteness wasn't questioned.
Mm-hmm.
So after that happened, some faculty of color were willing and very, very generously stepped up to offer some trainings to other faculty and administrators. Basically like, hey, did you know whiteness is a thing? Hey,
Right.
Can you identify what it means to be white?
Can I say something here?
Yeah.
And I mentioned this in the email that I sent you, but I want to call it out right now. You and I were, as always, we were close during that time. This was several years ago. And I learned so much from watching your journey with that and you talking to me about that. I saw how frustrated and upset you were and how willing you were to look at your own privilege. And I just want to say that had a real impact on me. So white people talking to white people about privilege, I am living proof that is a helpful thing.
Cool. That's nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was a mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I was a progressive person.
Right.
And I thought I had it handled. And then I was asked to name a way that my whiteness shows up in daily life. And I literally was like, I don't have an answer. I don't even know what you're asking, as a matter of fact.
Well, can we talk about that? Because that's one of the, I think that might be beneficial to some of our listeners, because I grew up probably lower middle class in Texas. And my father just always told me how poor we were. So that's a real tape in my head that I grew up poor. We were certainly not wealthy, but I acknowledge that we were better off than a lot of people. I am still not a wealthy person, but I think that it's so hard to name specific instances of privilege because it's such a part of our skin privilege lives.
Yeah.
That I would really like to try and do that, actually. Because it might be helpful for other people to see ways in which their privilege has influenced them. But it's also really hard because it's so hard to name what didn't happen to you.
Yeah.
Because you're white.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I can think of one specific example that's very telling from my own life, and then I'll talk about a tool that's available.
Great.
So the example is, I was driving home from my boyfriend's house at about 2 a.m. Because I decided I needed to be at my house before work the next day. And I had my dog with me in the car, and I wasn't speeding, and I had not been consuming substances that day. But I had a tail light out, and I didn't know it. And so I was pulled over by a police officer, and I rolled down the window about halfway because I knew the dog was in the car, and I just didn't want that to be a factor. I wasn't scared. I mean, let's be clear, I wasn't scared. The police work for me. I'm not scared of the police,
Right.
And he said, my dog lunged at him across me at the window when he came to the side of the car. And I pushed the dog away, and he said, "I'm so sorry to bother you, ma'am.
Oh,
Did you know you have a tail light out?" Right? Now imagine if I was a woman of color and my dog had lunged at a police officer in the car during a traffic stop.
Yeah.
And would I have gotten the same response? Absolutely not. In most cases, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So that, I was like, holy shit. Like, I'm glad I had a tail light out, because now I have a perfect example of the response I get from the police who work for me compared to the response a woman of color might get from the police who work against her, who are there to police her, right? So that's from a personal standpoint. From an educational one or an institutional one, there's a woman called Peggy McIntosh who wrote an article or essay or training packet. I'm unclear about what it was when it started, but it was called Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And it's a way to start looking at all of these aspects of your life where privilege is playing a role so that you can start to see it. And if you guys will just bear with me for a second, I'll get online and I'll find it. I don't have it prepared. We were trying to keep this as relaxed and normal as possible because there's something about like pretending to be expert that is also a part of privilege. Yeah. And we kind of wanted to make it clear that we are not. Not like any other episode of this podcast makes anyone think we're experts in anything. But in this one in particular, let's be very, very clear. So some of the questions in her section about daily effects of white privilege are things like, I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. I can avoid spending time with people whom I was raised or trained to mistrust and who have learned to mistrust my kind or me. I can avoid spending time with those people if I want and can live a totally normal, full life. If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and which I would want to live. I can be pretty sure that my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed, etc., etc. And this is a very long list of statements that you can either agree with or disagree with, you know, as is relevant to your particular areas of oppression and the particular place you live. But it's an excellent starting point. And I think she actually published this in the 80s. I mean, this is a very old document, or a very old training tool.
Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack.
Yeah, it's called White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh. And the statement that she prefaces all of these statements with is, I was taught to see racism only in individual acts of meanness, not in invisible systems conferring dominance on my group. Yeah. And so that's the switch, right? Yeah. So I think the last one of these statements is actually, there's one in here that just blew my fucking mind. Let me see if I can find it. I can think over many options, social, political, imaginative, creative, or professional, without asking whether a person of my race would be accepted or allowed to do what I want to do. So if you think about, I mean, when you and I were kids, you can be whatever you want to be. You can be whatever you want to be, right?
My mom literally told me that.
Yeah, mine too. And for people of color, that shit's not true. Like, period. And so, yeah, that was the one that really got me. So that's a great document. And I also want to give credit here to Dr. Carla Sherrill, Sherrell, who is core assistant professor at Naropa University. And her work basically laying this out so that white people could understand it has affected me and taught me more than anything else. She wrote a chapter called The Oppression of Black Bodies, the Demand to Simulate White Bodies and White Embodiment in the book Oppression and the Body, which is available from North Atlantic Books. Yeah, she's wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I also want to say very clearly that I'm not an expert. I've just done a little more thinking maybe than the average bear. So yeah, you sent me that email and I opened it and I was like, oh, I'm an aggressive, unyielding dick. Okay, cool. And I thought back on it, and as I sort of explained to you later, I kept saying, I didn't even call you to talk about this. I didn't even call you to talk about this. I needed to talk about something else. I was in a trauma response about something else that was happening in my life when you and I had that conversation on the phone that led to the email. And so I made all kinds of, like, I introduced the topic without being ready to deal with what I know happens to white people when this topic is introduced, right? So I introduced the topic, but then like wasn't willing to be the container for it, which is not how we do. We should not do it that way. If you introduce the topic, be willing to be the container as imperfectly as you can do it, you know? And also, yeah, when it's like, do you want me to send you some books or something? I was like, how do I get out of this conversation that I didn't even really want to be in? Like, what can I offer? What can I offer that'll get me out of this right now? I'll give her books. Right. And then later I was like, oh shit, that was the most condescending bullshit ever. Do you need to take a class from me?
I do. Well, well, I wanted to dig into our subsequent phone conversation, which was really great. So we are good friends. And as you said earlier today, we are close enough friends and we love each other enough to be able to make mistakes together and then heal.
Yeah.
So after I apologized for calling you an aggressive, unyielding dick, we talked and you said, and I'll have you rephrase this because I'm sure the words will come to your mind, but basically you said, it's okay. All of your responses are normal white person responses to being confronted with their privilege. And two things happen for me there. One is there is a sympathetic attempt there to say, it's okay. This is normal. But then again, we special white people don't want to be told you're just playing out your race, right? We don't want to be defined by that. We're special.
Yeah. We're
unique unicorns, you know?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting double edge to that response. But I was wondering, well, respond to that if you want, but also I was wondering if you could rephrase all of that and talk a little bit about those kind of typical white person responses to being, obviously we have an example of it in our conversation and my response, but could you name those aspects?
Yeah. So again, I learned these because of the work Dr. Carla Sherrill has done. So thanks to her for any insight I have. One of the things we love to do is take it super personally. That's the first. Because as you and I have just said, we operate on the personal. We don't have to think about the institutional because the institutional serves us. So we take it personally. And if white people have white privilege, that means Claire is calling Teresa a racist, right? It's like, oh, and you know, if you have good intention in the world, you don't want to be called a racist. You don't want to be that, right? You don't want to do that. You don't want to be that. So we take it really personally. If we are in conversation about it, we often get confused. We don't know how to respond. Our bodies may feel hot. Our breathing may change. And if we can't deflect the conversation into another ism, like, yeah, but what about classism? Like, you know, economic class, that's real too. You know, we'll try and deflect it into something else. Most often we'll try and deflect it into a place where we have a location of oppression. Right, because even people with skin privilege who have it so good in this country also have locations of oppression. That's real. They may not be visible, or they may be visible, but they'll try and move it to a place where they have a location of oppression, more comfortable there. And failing all of that, white ladies in particular really like to cry, which is, you know, maybe an involuntary response, sure. But then their tears demand from the room that the room take care of them first before you continue listening to a person of color who's speaking. And white lady tears are a really strong weapon of white supremacy. Because if we're upset and we're dysregulated and we need help as white ladies, the entire room moves to make us okay. The entire room moves to make us okay, if it's a room full of mostly people with skin privilege. And if we don't stop that and say, I'm crying But I mean, essentially, like, you can, in the moment, no, I didn't do this in the moment. This is not something. This is, I would love to see a person who's just been recently introduced to the concept that they are, in fact, a white supremacist, even though they don't want to be, right? Who then can, like, absorb that and take it in and then operate this way. It doesn't happen. I certainly didn't do it. But when that happens, if you can stop and say, actually, my feelings at being called a racist are not actually as important or big as the fact of oppression in this country. And that's it. That's huge for me right now.
Right.
It's like, as uncomfortable as we are being told that we are complicit, or acknowledging that we're complicit in these systems that unjustly oppress people of color, that discomfort is nothing compared to the experience of being oppressed.
Right.
And to put them on the same level in any way is super gross. It feels big, but it's gross.
Yeah. I want to name a couple things here, circling back to that. When you have skin privilege, you can still feel forms of oppression.
Mm.
One is just saying, again, it's hard to see the things that didn't happen to you.
Yeah.
Right? We're not practiced at that.
Yeah.
We need to get practiced at that. And the second thing is, I think poor white people need to talk about privilege. I think that's really important, because it's poor white people see the ways in which they feel they've been oppressed and the struggles they've had in their lives, which are real, and all of that. And I don't know, does anyone feel like they're really lucky and blessed? Really? And so to say to someone who feels oppressed and isn't happy with their lives, hey, guess what? You've actually lived a pretty blessed and privileged life.
Yeah.
Is hard for them to take in. That does not make that untrue.
Yeah.
On any level.
Yeah. One thing about that is, I think we should be super clear that oppression isn't a feeling. People say, I feel oppressed, or that made me feel oppressed. Feelings, just go back to what you know from being a child. Feelings are joy and anger and sadness and happiness and grief and love. Those are feelings. Oppression is an unjust system of control. So you can't feel oppressed. You either are oppressed or you're not.
Okay.
Right? And I'm not saying that to you. I'm not like correcting
No,
you.
that's fine. No, thank you for clarifying.
But it just brought that up, because that's another move we like to pull, is I feel oppressed. Okay.
I've never heard that, Teresa. That's new for me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oppression is a fact and action in the world, right?
Yeah, it's an institutional I don't want to say conspiracy, because it's not a conspiracy. It's a blatant fact. Oppression is an institutional reality where one group of people are subject to unjust control based on factor X, whatever that factor is. And in this country, it's race. Yeah. Now, there are when I say locations of privilege, locations of oppression, each person has multiple identities, right? I am a white lady, so I have the location of privilege. I have skin privilege. I walk in this world and everyone treats me like a white woman. I am from West Virginia. I am from lower middle class roots. I have locations of oppression in my economic background, but those aren't visible day to day. If I dress a certain way and drive a certain car, no one knows I'm poor, right?
Yeah.
I can hide it.
You can just hide that.
I can hide it, right? And so I think this is a can of worms, and I think this is where this conversation is going to get pretty interesting, is another one is, I am a cisgender woman, and that is a location of privilege that I have. And I've been watching the news over the last couple years where there's a sense among white feminists that I have heard speak that patriarchy is somehow worse than white supremacy, like comparing our two oppressive systems. Mm-hmm. While I am not qualified to rank systems of oppression, no one in a position of authority who is legally allowed to kill me has ever pulled me over because I'm a woman, But people who are in positions of authority who are legally allowed to kill people or illegally and can get away with it, which is more accurate,
Mm-hmm.
those people do pull people over based on their skin color. And so in this country, like, patriarchy's real, misogyny's real, but racism and white supremacy are worse, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So, did I answer you at all?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because this is an area where I feel uncomfortable, and so let's go there.
Yeah.
It does seem like there is a hierarchy of oppression.
Mm.
Is that okay to talk about? Like, or is that real? Is that, I mean, yeah, how do we address that? Is it just the biggest fire? You know what I mean? I mean, I think, I'm just going to talk off the cuff here. For me, we're talking about people losing their lives because of the color of their skin.
That's right. That
to me seems like the most important thing in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can't say what's right and what's wrong. Again, I'm not an expert. But I will say that it makes sense to me to look at the concrete lived experience of humans to determine who is receiving worse corrections for violating the rules that we live in, right? We live under white supremacy. If you violate the rules of white supremacy by not being white, right?
Right.
What are the possible consequences you face? And I believe that in America, the consequences faced by being a person of color, by not having skin privilege, by living in a white supremacist society are greater than the consequences experienced by women living in a patriarchy. So this is a patriarchy and it's a white supremacy, but the white supremacy, in my opinion, has much more far-reaching, murderous realities attached to it.
Yeah. And can you not also argue that if we have the kind of society that addresses white supremacy, that a side effect or an extension of that will be less of a patriarchy?
I mean, I sure hope so, right? I mean,
wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would. And that's actually a really powerful way of looking at it, particularly as white ladies. Now, I want to make it clear, women of color experience both white supremacy and patriarchy. Jesus Christ.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, horrible. All the time.
Like, I feel like an asshole for saying that. I can't even imagine. I can't.
Yeah. Well, you can't. You've never lived it.
Which is the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
You can see it yeah, exactly. And this is, I think, an opportunity for, I don't know. I don't want to say, another thing is like, there's and I'm experiencing this resistance right now, which is telling other white people what they should do. Like, there's a lot of resistance in me about that. Even though I'm really good at telling people what they should do, even though that's like my default position in the world is, you know what you should do. But telling other white people how they should approach this is really hard, right? I identified it much more strongly when I was doing the group work, but it's, if I speak up in service of dismantling white supremacy, what if they start to treat me like I'm not white?
Fuck.
Right? And that's it. And that's an irrational fear, because I'm always going to be white.
Yeah.
But that's the fear. Yeah. I mean, part of the reason this work is hard is you realize, oh, I thought I was a good person, but holy shit. Like, here are all of these like little pockets of rot in my soul that I gotta clean out. You know, gotta flush that out and suture it up and hope that I am still a whole person at the end of it. And it turns out you are. So if you're going through that process, you will actually be a whole person at the end of it, you know. Just doesn't feel like it sometimes. This is an opportunity for people who identify as women who are oppressed in a patriarchal society to, if we carry skin privilege, to say, you know what? Yeah, this is impacting me unjustly. And also, I can actually wait. I can wait. And my thing can come after this bigger, more important thing.
Right. Back of the line, white lady.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I mean, another question is, are you willing to stand at the back of the line somewhere? You never have to. And, like, literally, if you're a white woman, you want to jump to the front of the line, you can do that almost anywhere.
Right.
And there may be some social stuff that happens, and there may be some, like, personal friction or whatever. But no one's ever going to kick you out of the store for doing that. Yeah. And the way I describe that...
And then Trader Joe's will be there again tomorrow, don't worry.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the way I describe it is like, you know, like, I'm a white woman, don't make me ask to speak to your manager, because then I'll fire your manager and become your manager, you know? Yeah. Like, we have that.
It's the Karens of the world.
That's exactly right. So, like, the question is, can we use our innate Karen-ness in the service of social justice? Can we use it to dismantle white supremacy? And I think we can. Still figuring that out. Believe it's possible. I don't want to sound like an old person, but I listened to some punk rock when I was young, and I definitely, I called myself an anarchist, and I did work in those areas. I attended protests. I was tear gassed in Seattle in 1999 protesting the WTO because I think labor should be as free to move across national borders as capital is. And so I have, like, whatever bullshit pedigree that implies. And I kind of, and again, here we go. I'm centering white experience in a way that's kind of gross, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because I started to. So here, let's open it up and see it. I got tired of trying to talk to white people and of trying to do this because I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. And because I'm white, I didn't have to continue trying. I could just relax and my life would be pretty good. So that's definitely something I'm not proud of. Yeah, I'm actually going to cry. I'm so not proud of that. But I acknowledge that I did it, and I'm very, very hopeful now that these things that, 25 years ago, longer, that we were sort of talking about in the houses we lived in with 18 people in college, are such a part of the national conversation that late night hosts have just dedicated day after day after day to making this to making this move, to shifting this way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that. I got distracted by my own embarrassment, which happens. That's another thing white people do.
I just want to say on a relational level, I again do want to say that you talked to this white person, and it has made a difference.
Yeah, thank you. I remember somebody, when I was in grad school, I remember one of my classmates asking me, because we were talking about, oppression and, various locations of oppression, locations of privilege. This was 20 years ago, too. And I remember them asking, like, but what if it doesn't happen? Like, what if we do all this work and it actually doesn't change anything? Or, like, how will you know it worked? How will you... And I said, because I was very hopeful at the time, I said, yeah, I don't know if we get to know for sure if it helped. Like, I don't think we get to see the results. I don't think that's part of the deal. I think that if results happen, they'll happen away from us and we won't get to see them or know they happen. But we have to move forward again in faith that things will change. And I was really flip about it then.
It feels like a more valid question now, huh?
Yeah. And, and what if it doesn't? And this pops into, like, and another thing people who identify as educated and are white like to do is completely go into our head with it instead of actually feeling. And so part of why I'm going slower today is that I'm trying not to intellectualize because I'm super comfortable in my head.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and how based in white privilege is the fear that you won't have an appropriate impact on the world,
right?
Appropriate to your efforts.
That's right. How are they going to know I saved them if I don't, exactly. God, it's such bullshit. Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly it. And like, I described it once as like white supremacy and white privilege are a trough. And we're all just walking in a trough. We're at the bottom of the sine wave. It's super easy. We don't have to work very hard. We have to work really, really, really hard to walk on the crest of the sine wave, to walk out of the trough and stand in a place where we are actively and in each moment concerned with equity, right?
Yeah.
And working toward equity. Not even concerned with it, but actively working toward it is super hard. And it's so easy to get comfortable and take a step in a slightly wrong direction, then boom, you're right back in the trough of white supremacy.
Right.
Like it,
Yeah.
you know, like it's powerful. It draws you in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm curious, just curious your thoughts on this. I'm curious about my own thoughts on this too. That's why I'm bringing it up. Like, is an America without white privilege A, possible? And B, what would that look like? Like, what, I mean, we could name a little bit what white people are afraid of giving up, right? What they think they'd be giving up, these ways in which we're privileged every single day and largely unaware of. But like, what would that look like? Because from my perspective, what I want to say, what the positive part of me wants to say is like, well, we're just opening up the table, right? We're just inviting more people in, and then more people are privileged. Like, everybody is privileged. But like, when I really hold myself down and go like, hey, are you willing to give this stuff up?
Right.
Like, what does that mean? And because we don't name white privilege, it's hard to even know what we're giving up, what we're hopefully fighting for or examining in our own lives. But like, what am I offering up?
Yeah. It's interesting the way you phrase that. Opening up the table implies that it's your table to open up.
Yep, there you go.
And there it is. Like, that's centering whiteness. What if it wasn't your fucking table? What if you didn't get to decide? Not you fucking, you know.
You're right.
Not Claire.
I get it.
What if it wasn't my fucking table? What if I didn't get to decide who got to sit at it? What if I had to fight for a seat at it too?
Oh,
it's
man,
that
gets me.
It's that.
Yeah. That makes me real uncomfortable.
Right?
That's hard.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. Like, I think this actually connects back to white people who don't make a lot of money. I think it connects back to that, because my sense is that they're already fighting so hard. Like anyone who doesn't have money in a capitalist society is kind of fucked, right? You're always fighting if you don't have money. You're always pushing. There's always that background anxiety. What if I had to fight harder? It's already hard enough. If it's this hard and I have all of this privilege, how much harder is it going to be if I don't have it? Mm-hmm. I think that might be part of the root of the fear. That's a concern. You know, and I have cousins, God bless them. I have some cousins who are definitely doing this work, and some who refuse to even acknowledge that white privilege is real. And it's people who don't leave the county they grew up in. It's like people who've never gone anywhere or experienced anyone other than their high school friends. And now they have a job that they've had for 30 years, and they just know those people. They know 10 people. And they're like, it's not real. What are you talking about? Yeah. And to those people, I say, Paul, read a book.
Teresa has some she can send you.
Yeah, exactly. Claire didn't want them, so.
I do want that. Well, okay, so returning back to this discussion and, I don't know, reaction of mine. I was saying to you on the phone earlier that ironically yesterday I was like, I really should follow up with Teresa and have her send those books. Yeah. So like, the thing that pissed me off so bad 2 weeks ago is now like clear to me. That's what I should do.
Yeah.
Is read books.
Yeah.
At the very least. It's like the minimum. Sit in my cozy little house, away from it all, and read about this.
What would it look like? Something like that?
Is it possible?
Is it possible?
Like, and what would it look like?
I think it looks like reparations.
Yeah.
I think it looks like reparations, straight up. I mean, this country is economically founded on the enforced enslavement of millions and millions of people who worked for free to build the economic foundations of the country. Worked for free. That's not the right way of saying it. Who were tortured and just, enslaved and forced to work so that other people could enjoy that labor. And I think it looks like reparations. I mean, yes. full on, adjusted for inflation reparations.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's ultimately what we're talking about. I mean, we're talking about economic privilege ensured by the oppression of various groups. And the group most oppressed and most exploited were people who were enslaved. Period. Now, we can also talk about giving back the land we stole from the people who lived here before we landed here. That's also something that needs to happen.
Right.
But then I tend to be pretty radical, and I don't know how to make that happen, but I believe that's what needs to happen. Honor the treaties, pay reparations. Because, I mean, like, if we don't do those things, we're not actually, we have to have skin in the game. We have to have skin in the game. And having skin in the game means acknowledging that our financial security, such as it is for some people, is based on oppressing others. And so if you have what you have because you oppressed other people, you need to fucking give up what you have. Like, that's a part of making that right.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to put that on a bumper sticker.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
I believe that saying that in my body, with how I look in the world, cis, het, white lady, in a wealthy county with a high level of education and an audience of people who tend to be wealthier and have higher levels of education, if I just say that in mixed groups over and over and over and over again. Yeah, which actually points to another thing, which is there's a lot of social pressure to not talk about whiteness with white people, which is, I think, why we wanted to have this conversation. And I said it before, like, I get nervous talking about whiteness with white people because they react poorly. I reacted poorly. We all react poorly.
I reacted poorly.
Yeah. And like I said, if you're not lucky enough or you haven't sought out the experience of learning how to be a container for this kind of conversation, you really easily just stop getting invited to parties. Like, you're just like, oh God, like, she's the one who will not fucking shut up about that, you know? And on one hand, we should never fucking shut up about it. It's really, really important. And the fact that it's even possible for us to stop talking about it is an indicator of our privilege.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And on the other, I don't want to have no friends.
Right.
Right? I mean, yeah, humans are.
I mean, maybe this is just going to sound like not enough, but maybe we could ask people to talk to, ask white people,
Yeah.
to talk to another good friend, white person about this. Someone that they have a foundation of trust and love with. And we start there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's obviously not enough, but it would be a start, right?
Yeah. I mean, having these conversations have to happen. Like, at some point, you know, and I was worried when you wrote me back. I was like, oh shit, did I just end a 15-year friendship?
Right. Yeah.
Shit. Whiteness is that powerful, you know? Like,
Yeah,
talking about
yeah.
it's that powerful. I was like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. She's just doing that flare up we all do. It was really
the white lady flare up.
That's right. It was really sweet when I got it, you know. And it's so important that we direct that stuff at other white people. You cannot fucking direct that stuff at people of color. You cannot ask them to contain this for you. You cannot ask them to teach you. Like, oh my God. And that's clear. Like, people are kind of getting that. Mm-hmm. So the next step is, like, white people need to talk to other white people. I pulled this book because I have the 4 that I'm most recently looking at again, and it's called Black Girl Dangerous, and Black Girl Dangerous is a blog by writer and thinker Mia McKenzie. It's blackgirldangerous.org. So she wrote a book just called Black Girl Dangerous, and I was just like, let's just do a little bibliomancy. Let's just flip open to a page and see what she has to say. And here's what came up. She's talking about shared female experience. Despite these and 100 other examples, the myth of shared female experience prevails. Why? Well, the easy answer is that because women, in quotes, are so vulnerable to so many different injustices, even if that vulnerability is vastly different from one group to another, lumping us all in together gives us a louder voice and more power to change things. even if that's true, the downside of all of that is that this lumping together is significant because it allows people with the loudest voices within the group to always be dominating the conversation. And because those voices rarely, if ever, even understand the experiences of the less heard members of the group, not only can they not speak for them, which they shouldn't be doing anyway, they can rarely even understand the importance of making space for them to speak for themselves. So that's what Mia Mackenzie has to say in this moment. And I think about that in relation to white feminism versus inclusive feminism. Yeah. Or I'm sure there's a better way of naming both of those things now. I think white feminism is still appropriate, but equitable feminism, something like that.
Well, it's easier to fight for yourself, right?
Sure. It's also really easy, particularly when you have these locations of privilege, to assume that your perspective is everyone's perspective and that what's right for you is going to be right for everyone and that you have similar experiences.
I'm super guilty of that. I am so guilty of that.
Well, and that's white liberalism at its core, right? Is we're all human. We're all human deep down. I don't see color. Okay, great. But cops do. And cops shoot a particular color and not the other one. So, yeah. And I'm not saying that at you. I hope all of this is clear.
Yeah, I get it.
I lost my train of thought again. This is another thing. Is like it's hard to talk about it in a sustained way. Right. I have been at dinner parties with 10 white people and one person of Asian descent where people were sort of talking about these issues and said, well, you know, we as white people talking about the people around the table. And I'm like, that person is not a white person. She does not walk through the world as a white person. And I've done it. I'm not saying other people do it and I catch them. I've done that too. Mm-hmm. I should have told that story as though I did that particular example, you know. But that's really, like, we want it to be okay. We want it to be okay sometimes so much that we're willing for it to not be okay for someone else as long as they're quiet about it.
Right.
You know? And I can't imagine. Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying, like, and that's the thing, like, I haven't been in a room, I don't think ever, where I clearly had a location of oppression that other people didn't, and where I knew or suspected that my input and experience was not wanted. Just, you know, white ladies run every single organization, like, not every single, again, see, there it is. White ladies run every single organization. No, we fucking don't. But I operate like we do. See, this is actually the edge of my ability right now. I'm definitely working this and getting better at this. Yeah. So not only centering white experience, but assuming that it's universal. That's what I'm working on right now. So these other books that I pulled really quickly, Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, if you don't believe that people of color are incarcerated at rates and in sentences vastly greater than people with skin privilege for the same crime, you should read this book. She's, I believe she's a social scientist. Hold on. She's an associate professor of law at Ohio State University, which is really interesting because Ohio State University is in Columbus, which is only 2 hours from where my people are in West Virginia. I don't know if she's still there. This was published several years ago now. But yeah, she basically broke down, like, Jim Crow laws didn't actually go away. They just sort of got pushed into, more specifically, into the criminal justice system. I had someone send me a meme that said, if only I had known sooner that the criminal in criminal justice system actually modified the word system. I was like, that is exactly fucking right. It's a criminal system. That's it.
Right.
Like I said, Black Girl Dangerous by Mia Mackenzie. That's awesome. Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. Also beautiful. I know this one less, but it's very good. Anything by Bell Hooks is amazing. Everyone should read James Baldwin. If you like sci-fi, please read Octavia Butler. Please read N.K. Jemisin. She's amazing too. Like, seek out voices that are not white voices.
I 100% agree with you. And the one thing I stand behind in that email I sent you is that story is important. Mm-hmm. And seeking out stories that are not your story. is so important. And I saw someone frame it as, you know, participating in Black culture as though it's, you know, could be performative. And I certainly see that, but I think it is important to see those stories. To hear those stories.
I mean, it's not performative if you're not walking around telling everybody you're doing it. If you're just doing it and absorbing different perspectives. Yeah, like I said, I haven't been on Facebook since last November, and I made that choice because I was just really deeply unhappy, and I think rightly assessed that social media was a part of that, and that quick-paced surface, like all the things that are nice about it and fun about it, I just wasn't getting anything from, and so I stopped, and I realized that a lot of the thinking and feeling I was doing around these topics was not in order to post something, but somehow felt complete upon posting something. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. That's not, I mean, maybe it's real. Maybe somebody saw it and was like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, you know? And I like to think I have a pretty intelligent, sensitive, caring group of friends who want to be better than we are, and who recognize that injustice that benefits us is something that we need to take a part in fixing, changing, erasing, etc. But also, like, I was like, yeah, I think my motivations are not pure here necessarily.
Well, it's easy to feel like when you hit that post button, you're done, right?
Right. I've done it. And I think maybe, and this is probably justification, but I'll say it anyway. I think for people who are teachers or have taught or have that, you know what you should do kind of way of being in the world, like, this is something I can offer, I think. It's just that that's not the right platform. That's like snacky times. That's not, and it's time to like sit down and actually eat the meal and do the thing. Yeah. Another great one is White Fragility. White Fragility is great for white ladies who want to understand. The subtitle is Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And it's by Robin DiAngelo. And I can't remember. Claudia Rankine, who's a poet I really love and was lucky enough to be near when I was in grad school, reviewed it and very much liked it. And this is where a lot of my learning about whiteness came from. And the thing is, like, it's truism that, so, and this is from readings in critical theory and philosophy, like Antonio Gramsci, who's an Italian philosopher, said that no hegemony is ever complete. So no system of oppression is ever completely successful at oppressing the elements it's attempting to. So that's hopeful for me. And also, people who are in locations of oppression relative to you will always see your location of privilege more clearly and see the ways it functions and how you operate with it more clearly than you can see it yourself. Yeah. And so when someone is willing to write a book about what whiteness is from a position that can see it so much more clearly than I can as a white person, I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Please, I'm going to buy your book. Like, thank you for being willing to do that. I realized, and this is not necessarily related to racism and white privilege right away, but bear with me because I think it ultimately is. I realized a couple weeks ago I was in line for something, and the person I was waiting for was running late, and I was getting frustrated, and my script that started running was, I can't even really afford to be here, and I'm waiting, and I'm working so hard, and I can't afford this. And now I have to wait and I was basically throwing a little tantrum in my head. And then I realized that that's not actually true. That right at the moment, I actually can afford that. And so, like, that script where I can't afford it, I can't afford to combat my own white supremacy. I'll lose too much. Like, all of those are just beliefs. Treat them like you would treat other beliefs, be willing to interrogate them, etc. And sometimes they're real. Financial constraint is real. Sometimes that's real. Sometimes it is actually a choice between eating or buying a book, right? Yeah. But a lot of times it's not. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's not. And just be clear with yourself about when it's real and when it's a script you've run to protect yourself from the feelings you might feel starting to deal with your white supremacy. Yeah. And I don't know if it's super functional. It feels like it is. I don't know if it is for sure, though. And this is definitely something I want to, seek out voices who know more than I do about this. But starting from the position of, I am a white person in America, therefore I am racist. Therefore I am a white supremacist. Whether I want to be or not, that's what I am. Mm-hmm. And I have to choose to not be. The task is always to choose to not be. I think that's more functional. At least it's more functional for me. Because the task is clear. I know what I'm trying to not do. I know what I'm trying to do. And I'm clear when I've done one or the other. Whereas starting out with, I'm not a racist, and I need to make sure that no one ever thinks I am. Oof, that's a rough one.
Yeah, that is.
That's a rough one. Because then it's all performative. It's all about what other people see. There's no button on this, you guys. This is just a ramble conversation. There's no neat conclusion.
I was just thinking, I don't know what to contribute.
Yeah.
I mean, I want a name that part of me just hopes we all take a really good look at this for a couple weeks and then everything's better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I just want to name that.
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah. It took 400 years to get here. I'm sure we can solve it in a couple weeks. Yeah. There's something I wanted to say about our relationship in particular. Like that email.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Nervous.
Everything has led up to me actually excoriating you now.
You're breaking up with me on the air, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah, this is over. Never. To the end of the line, pal, you and me. It was interesting when we were talking about it before we recorded this morning. You kept framing that argument that we had as you fucking up and then realized that you fucked up. And I was like, let's actually, look at what really happened, which is that we both fucked up.
Right.
And my mistakes were from a slightly different place of work with these topics than yours.
Yes.
But I'm not better than anyone because I've done this work. Like,
right. It's
not a yardstick of how cool I am. Except to myself.
Right.
Like, yeah, and this feeling, I definitely have the feeling of like wanting credit for the work I've done. Definitely want it. Mm-hmm. But also, whether I get it or not, it is correct. And with me, like, the right thing is always more important than, like, that's my thing. It's like, is it correct? Well, then, I mean, everything should be geared toward that then. Yeah. And I know not everybody feels that way. I know a lot of people are either not as good at bracketing their own feelings as I am, or like work with their feelings in a different way than I work. I insist that my feelings go through my brain first. And after 40 years, they finally agreed to do that.
Right.
But the detente we came to is that I then allow them, once they've gone through my brain, I allow them to come back down into my body. Right. But they have to go to the brain first.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a proper use of the word detente. I feel like I need to look up Kissinger now, but
I liked it. I'm all for it.
Cool. Yeah, so that email, like, we both fucked up. And you're absolutely right that looking on social media and in other in bestseller lists and your local group of standing up or showing up for racial justice, if you have one, or, I mean, there are people out there, like, it's not like going to like an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in a church basement. It's not like that. And if it is, it doesn't have to be like that. I think of like how I roll my eyes when I think about consciousness raising groups from the 70s. And like how annoyed as an introvert who operates the way I operate, how annoyed I would have been to be in those. I'm like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, just, oh God. But also, like, am I willing to be slightly uncomfortable if it's going to maybe help a large number? If I can, by doing that, let go of my own privilege. Or if I can't let go of it, concretely use it in the service of people who are oppressed. That's the thing. we can't like go live in the woods and not have privilege, because when we come to town, we're still white, right? So you can't say I'm just not going to be privileged anymore. You're always going to be.
Yeah.
This system operates for your benefit, and you cannot stop it by not participating in the system. So
and if you don't recognize and name your white privilege, you don't see how you can leverage it to help other people. So that's why it's so important that we have these conversations initially, in which we name it and we see it and we look at it. And I really want to look at the invisible knapsack, unpacking the invisible knapsack, and take a look at those places in my own life, because I don't feel like I've adequately named that.
Yeah. And, you know,
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail what you were saying.
Oh, no, not at all. No, that's great. Like, I'm totally in favor. This is not Teresa lecture time. This is conversation.
Teresa lecture time is Tuesdays at 8 a.m.
That's right.
So you all know.
If you want to attend that podcast seminar. And it's basically this. It's just I don't have anyone awesome to talk to. So it's much more boring than this. It doesn't have to be a meeting in a church basement. It doesn't have to be like, and if you do it with people you don't know, another impulse is to really question their motives and think they only invited me there so that they could make me feel bad. Like, it's really easy to go there. Because it's easier to be a victim than it is to, like, work through it. And I did it. Everything that I'm saying is bad to do. I know that it's true because I did it. So, empathy, not judgment. So, working with people you're already friends with. If you have a friend and you seem to be on the same page about this and you want to talk about it in more detail, I think that's probably a good way to go. Now, I could be saying that because I'm trying to protect white feelings. And so that the fact that I'm suggesting that could also be a manifestation of my privilege. That's totally true. But we got to start talking about it, because we're killing people. Yeah. And this is like, I've been crying all week, you know, but I'm crying and other people are dead. So again, my feeling's not as important as the fact that people are dying. Yeah. You were really, I have to say, I was really impressed with how quickly you rebounded. Like, when I read the email, I was like, oh yeah, here's the checklist, and yep, okay. And I remember what people said to me when they were telling me it was a checklist. I was like, I will tell her those things now. I will learn one, do one, teach one. I'll tell her those things now. But yeah, like, recording this, like, do people really need to hear two white ladies talk about it? I mean, so many white people are talking about it, right? And you and I talked about whether we invite someone on to talk, or, you know, we know people who would be willing to come and talk about it, but we don't pay people for being our guests. This podcast makes no money, which, if you've heard it, you know why that's true. So we don't pay people. We put it out for free, and we don't pay people for coming on. And so, you know, that, like, the fact that you rebounded so quickly and you were like, oh, actually, yeah, that is true. And, like, just willing to look at yourself. And yeah. And this again pops out into, like, really broad philosophical stuff, which is probably not very interesting. But, like, balance being nice to yourself with acknowledging that other people are not concerned about being nice to themselves because they're afraid for their lives. You know?
Yeah. This kind of brings up for me my discomfort with your anger.
Mm.
And again, this comes back to watching you process through the training you received. Like, I remember the anger at the injustice that you felt, which now, from a more calm and clear-headed place, I think is really beautiful and empathetic. But I was really uncomfortable with that. I just want to say that. I think that's just part of the discomfort of the conversation, is because I know for myself, looking at Black anger is really hard. I 100% believe it's justified, but it's really hard to look at. We in this country, we have a hard time with anger, period. And especially as women, we have a hard time with anger. So that's difficult. And then confronting it in another white woman is really difficult. And I think that might be a little bit of sexism mixed in there as well.
I want to unpack that more for sure. So you're talking about back in the day, whatever, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. when I would come.
I was like, don't poke the bear. Like, this is, I had seen you feel really angry at the institutionalized racism.
Yeah.
When you were getting your training at the institution where you were. And I remember I felt like I was more on the receiving end because I just wasn't in a place where I was just listening because I couldn't meet it. Mm-hmm. So I remember receiving the fact that you were very angry. Mm. And so one of the reasons why I told you it was hard for me to discuss white privilege with you was because I was scared of your anger. Mm. I don't think I expressed it that way at all. But I'm telling you that now.
Okay, cool. That's interesting on a personal level because I don't feel like my anger is that powerful, but you're a powerful person. And I don't feel like my anger is that powerful, but you are a powerful person. And if it alarmed you, then that is a note for me.
I think it made me uncomfortable. I think the entire thing makes me uncomfortable. Yeah. So I just think there was a little mixture of sexism and discomfort with anger, period. And then putting it in the context of skin privilege is just a recipe for me to freak out. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah. I wouldn't take that as a personal note on any level.
Oh,
but
okay.
Your anger is powerful. but don't take it as a note.
I feel sometimes, well, and I describe it like when I'm really mad, I'm like, I just want to light them on fire. Like, that's really what I want, is to like, I want them to be a human candle and I want to watch it burn. So yeah, that's something about me that we know now. But you said something that was really interesting, that reminded me of something. You were talking about being just uncomfortable with Black anger, right? With the anger of people of color. And how many controls we like to put on how angry you're allowed to be. And if you are angry, how you express it. And, policing tone is one of the ways we try to control the conversation. And in those groups at that institution, it was pointed out by many women of color that when they were sad and crying, they were supportive. But when they showed their anger, we stopped supporting them. And I was like, yep, that's 100% true. My bad. Okay. So like, anger is not, that's it.
Let me ask you a question. How do you support anger?
Oh, what a great question. I don't know the answer. Let's see.
I think this is part of my discomfort with your anger is I didn't know how to, I certainly couldn't meet it in that moment and be angry with you. I don't think that's necessarily support. But yeah, I don't know. And it's also not shutting down, which is my other reaction. So yeah, how do we support anger?
Yeah. I think by not requesting that it turn into something else.
Yep.
That's maybe step one. Like, let it be what it is.
And giving it space.
Yeah. Letting it have the mic for kind of, especially with a topic like this, for as long as it wants. Like, let it have the mic for as long as it wants. Because we've had the mic for 400 years. So maybe we, letting it be what it is, not, I don't know if this is true or not, but maybe like not, it feels like in any conversation among people who have different levels of skin privilege, that when anger comes up, there's this, we want it to go away. We want to make it better, in air quotes, right? We want to make it better. And usually what that means is that we want it to go away. And maybe for white people, it's actually possible that being heard in our anger does make it go away. Because maybe our anger arises from more circumstantial things that are fleeting. Whereas the anger I think that people of color are experiencing is coming from a place where they don't, it's not like when they're mad and then we are emotionally supportive as people. Again, all of this is keeping it on the personal level. And I think this is where like I need to learn more, because trying to keep it on the personal is almost always reinforcing white supremacy. Like, so acknowledging that like their anger, they are feeling anger as a person, but they are feeling it because of institutional things. Yep. And those institutional things are not going to change for me. I'm still going to benefit from them, whether I'm kind and supportive of their anger interpersonally or not.
Right.
So shit, I don't know where I was going with that. But it seems important that the personal and institutional levels of racism, because like you said earlier, because we live in a white supremacist society, we have what's called role power. Like our role is that institutional level of meaning. We are white people before we are Teresa and Claire. Yeah. And so trying to keep it Teresa and Claire is in a way denying that institutional level exists.
Mm-hmm.
Or refusing to engage with it at that level. Again, I don't I don't have a neat ending.
I think defining the difference between the personal and the institutionalized and the personal always reinforcing white supremacy is a really beneficial piece of information.
I feel like anywhere I go from here is definitely going to go into my head, which probably means it's something that I haven't processed back down into my body yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell if I'm reluctant because I don't want to step out of some kind of groundedness with it, and I'm already over-intellectualizing as I'm telling you why I'm thinking about over-intellectualizing. So
well, why don't you say it, and if you decide it doesn't work, we can cut.
Yeah, like tagging back in on this idea that trying to keep everything on the personal, and like as Mia McKenzie said, like, don't assume shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just because you're both in class together and you're taking the same classes, your experience of the world is very different. And there's this thing where like, oh well, especially here where we are, like a large proportion of the white liberals of Boulder County, Colorado. Yeah, a large proportion of the white liberals in Boulder. Well, we're all just people.
Right.
And it's like, well, sure. Again, some of us are being killed because of the color of our skin and some of us aren't. So I don't see color is it a neurological problem? Like,
right.
Okay. Oh, do you have problems with your vision? Okay. Because not seeing color, if that's your retreat, that's because you don't want to see whiteness, I would say. If you say that you don't see color, it's because you don't want to look at whiteness.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, the people who are, like, the vast majority of legislators and, people in positions of institutional power in the country are still white. That's true. And a lot of those people are our age or older. And so the social media conversations, like, the youth are the future, man. Like, people I'm in grad school with right now are 20 years younger than me and are so much more
it's true
correct in the way they're approaching this. So I'm pleased at the movement of that. But for the most part, the older folks are still the ones making the laws. If I think about trying to petition those people and talk about it in ways they can work with, I look at those sort of tropes from the 60s that arose, like, we're all humans and I don't see color and underneath we're all the same and all of that. And I just invite those people to look at, underneath our skin we're all the same, but unfortunately we walk around wearing our skin almost every day. And we are treated differently based on the skin suit we're wearing, So, yeah. Sorry, I just imagined a bunch of flayed people walking around, which is not. I don't know why my brain went there. Oh man,
mine did too, actually.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't know. I feel talked out at the moment.
Yeah, me too. I think let's talk to other white people about this.
Yeah.
Let's name our privilege.
Yeah. I love you, Claire. I mean, it was a really hard couple days, but I think it was really worthwhile in the long run.
I'm really glad we had a fight, I guess, is the simple way of saying it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Testing. Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.